Hi everyone, welcome back. Elden Ring is a game I've had conflicted feelings about, so join me as I give it one final playthrough to determine, do I hate Elden Ring? This video is part of a series, so if you haven't seen it yet, you'll want to start with the first part. As a reminder, I'll be using spirit summons, but I'll be avoiding Black Knife Tiche and Mimic Tear unless I am truly stuck. I'll also be avoiding commonly considered broken tools like Hoarfrost Stomp, Moonveil, and Comet Azure. The goal is to see if I enjoy how the game plays, not if I can make a build to trivialize it. Last time I finished exploring Limgrave for any useful scraps of equipment to give me an edge on market. This time around, I'm pulling a one-man siege of Stormveil Castle. With that, let's get back into it. Stormveil is the first of the legacy dungeons I have access to, and the difference of this handcrafted environment compared to the slew of caves and catacombs is night and day. Unique environments with environmental storytelling, good use of vertical design to make interesting layouts, and a compelling progression as you get further in. Even before entering, there's a section that wraps under the step leading to the entrance. The first area in the castle proper is a nice preview of the vertical level design that's going to be a staple of these legacy dungeons. There's the obvious tiered platforms that are part of the critical path. There are ambushes here, but you're rewarded for patience. Half the time, the enemies will just blow themselves up. There are useful items no matter which area you're exploring. This is a good start for such a small area. I'm less of a fan of the trapdoor that locks you into a fight with the knight. The knights hit hard, move fast, and have an AoE that can stagger. And the arena is filled with clutter. It's at least breakable, but the knight gets to break it for free. It'll cost you stamina. A slower moving enemy might be affected, but the knights just move too fast for that to be relevant. Just another disadvantage given to the player. At least there's a talisman for the trouble. Next up, another knight, with a halberd. And here we see even more obnoxious AI behavior creeping through. So I mentioned that the knights have an AoE that can stagger. That AoE is a full 360 arc around them, so it's meant to force you to take pressure off them, right? It doesn't do any damage after all. Except, because it staggers, it gives a free hit, and it can be chained into a full 3-hit combo, which is also an AoE with an even longer range. Not to mention, the ridiculous tracking on some of its non-AoE attacks, which can turn a full 180 on a downswing. Some will lock it in place, allowing you to sneak in an extra hit. Others will have to be dodged in reaction to the downswing and no earlier. The difficulty of the fight essentially boils down to how often it spams a given attack. My first fight was all homing halberds and AoEs. In my second, it only used the AoE twice, and it never used its follow-up. I was able to kill it in the middle of its third attempt. And just to make it more annoying, it's right before the next grace, so if you die, it's time for a run back. The Tower Rampart Grace gives a choice. Continue along the critical path towards the boss or go upwards to the roof of the tower. The roof of the tower is a seeming dead end, but a player who has been paying attention to the way the level has been designed may notice some pathways just on the other side of the ledge, with a pile of bags pointing right to them. The clever player is rewarded with an entire optional segment along the roofs. Of course, it can't all be good. There's another obnoxious battle, a fire-breathing bird. It wasn't a hard fight, at least in this playthrough, but the way the camera tracks it makes it a nauseating experience. And the vertical design does lead to sometimes being dropped into areas where there's no way of progressing. At least fast travel can take care of that, and I'll gladly take that as a trade-off for more intricate levels. Back on the critical path, and not even 100 feet from the Grace, there's another hidden area. If you can see past all the bombs and birds throwing bombs, there's a drop you can take off the left side of the wall, and another drop onto a small ledge. This is a lot more hidden than the path to the rooftops, but it shows what kind of areas you should be on the lookout for in these dungeons. You're rewarded for your curiosity with an Ash of War, and an annoying fight, of course. It's at least easily skipped, and just past it is an elevator that takes you back to the Grace, so if you want to try throwing yourself at the fight, you can. I give it a shot if only to get the somber smithing stone next to it, but the Crucible Knight is fast, durable, and fought in a small area for how quickly it can move. I get into a rhythm for most of its attacks, but the shield bash keeps tripping me up because the range and delay feel arbitrary. How far does the move go? How long does it take to come out? Whatever it takes to get a hit in, really. It doesn't help that I feel like I'm doing scratch damage at best. This is another fight I decide to leave for another day. Back on the critical path, for real this time. And birds are still annoying. The flaming barrels they throw aren't a problem, as long as you're patient. But the nauseating camera is just apparently a universal trait. They also have an insanely long aggro range, so just running past them isn't a good solution. not that it stopped me from trying. It also makes it hard to bait them into one-on-one fights, which is more comfortable mechanically. Of course, this is also ignoring that I haven't been using the spell I have, but I'm trying to focus on a new build and not just lean into one that I've already found workarounds for. We'll see how long that lasts, I guess. The next segment has multiple ways through, but the goal is all about making it to the courtyard and the boss door at the end. There's a revenant in the way, but it's easily avoided, and I ain't dealing with that today. The courtyard itself is just a mass of enemies, but they're frail enough, and as long as you aren't careless, you're not likely to be overwhelmed. You can even use a spirit summon here. I was considering using the wolves, but since I was worried about them drawing more enemies than I could manage, I used the jellyfish instead. She's worked for me so far, and continued to be a valuable asset in combat. I have to say though, the layout of the enemies leaves something to be desired. It's just rows of the same enemies on cannons. I understand it's meant to evoke soldiers holding off a siege, but it doesn't quite evoke the same character of the knight patrolling the halls, the dogs feeding on piles of corpses, or the sentries watching from the balconies outside the tower. I can accept it as a gameplay challenge. Gameplay is always priority, but it's just a stark contrast given the other examples that are able to blend both in this very dungeon. Past the courtyard is a more linear stretch up to the boss guarded by more birds. Joy. I don't learn my lesson and try to run past them. I'm distracted when I remember that this is where Nepheli is, and I'll probably want her help with the boss. I'm stuck fighting an agile enemy in a small room, and this time, the only one I can blame is myself. I actually deal with the first bird without much issue, just to be surprised by the second. I am able to get a few hits in, but I have to stop swinging in fear of hitting Nepheli. It would be nice if she could lend me a hand here. And then there's this guy. Where did he even come from? Doesn't matter. I stacked up too much damage and the bird gets the last shot in. Second time around, and it's time to approach this more intelligently. I use glintstone pebble to peel them off one at a time to make them easier to deal with. Finally remembering the whole reason I got the spell. But now I can talk to Nepheli in peace. Nepheli has a very involved quest I've never finished, and I'm not sure I'll finish it here either, honestly. I've gotten to the point where I've given her the ashes, but never progressed past that. Her quest is tied up into some other quests in Limgrave, and I'm not sure which ones, and I'm not motivated to try to find out. Right now, she'll be a summon against the boss, and that's all I really need. There's a giant right before the next grace, and I really don't feel like having to run back through the courtyard if I mess up the fight, so I run past it. I could try to drop back to the courtyard to smash the statue, but is that fun? It's not exactly a puzzle, the solution is obvious, even with the misdirection of the troll that couldn't break it. But the answer is tedious. And for what? Some low-level smithing stones? Smithing stone 1 isn't exactly the one I have a problem finding. I'm not going to hold this against the dungeon, as it's more a problem with needing to fill every corner of the game with something. Events like these and the beetles are just a little too copy and paste, so they start blending together. It's very much a problem across open world design in general. There's already enough of the game, and I would rather have a tighter experience than thinking, oh, this again. Anyway, I move past it entirely and rest at the grace. I'm at the boss door, but we aren't quite done yet. See, all those hidden areas around the castle were just teasers for what's waiting. A short way from the grace is a path that seems like a dead end, but an observant player may notice a ridge just wide enough for the player to stand on and a body with an item looking across towards the window. Put two and two together, and you're on the start of a path to a hidden area, and it just keeps going down. Just when you think you've hit an end, you notice off the side of the wall is a cliff that you're just able to jump down to. There are some enemies on the way down, but nothing unmanageable. I gladly take the bats hanging from the archways over having to deal with more birds. I remember I have magic this time, letting me get a first shot in and making this encounter easier than it might have been otherwise. I'm trying not to make this a Spellblade build. I'm really not. But it's this or a bow, and one of these doesn't have an ammo requirement. It's just the more practical option. The next step down is less hidden than the rest of this has been. There's even an item showing you the way. And suddenly you find yourself standing at the bottom of a massive canyon. In fact, if you were looking around thoroughly earlier, you might have even seen glimpses of it. As I've been going down, the light has been able to get through less and less. One final drop, and the last glimpse of light as I deal with rats. There are rewards waiting for you in this place hidden away from the world. A spell, some interesting lore implications as you come across the face of Godwyn the Golden, growing from the ground like a corruption, and the Prince of Death's pustule, a useful talisman. This is great, An interesting story told naturally through the build of the level, and hints at a greater narrative that has had an impact on the world, helping to explain the state it's in. What's not so great is the fight before it. The ulcerated tree spirit is a massive, fast-moving boss fought in an arena too small for its size and speed. Because of course it is. The ulcerated tree spirit is honestly in the running for one of the worst fights in the game for me. It doesn't really matter which one I'm talking about, just pick one and I'll agree that it's the worst. It's another instance of the game breaking its own rules instead of managing the encounter around the limitations of where the fight is. You'll be seeing it clip through the terrain often if you can see past the camera spazzing out trying to keep up with them. They are at least optional, not that it's a great consolation. You only need to fight 2 Shardbearer bosses to make your way through the main story, but on a larger level, gaming as a whole is optional. This is something I choose to spend my time on. It should at least be fun. This ain't it. If you do decide to run past it, just don't change your mind halfway through to fight it, because there's a good chance you'll lock yourself into an even smaller arena, and the problems it has just become so much worse. I thought I could at least use the elevation to my advantage, and that didn't go well. It actually did help a little, but it also made its already hard to read moves that much harder. Specifically its breath attack. I just didn't have a good way to dodge it where I was, and I was too close to actually be able to see it coming. Even trying to recover just led to me getting hit again. There's 10 of these things in the game, by the way. I also feel like I'm not really damaging it, so I plan to look at upgrading my sword and strength a bit after this if I can. For now, I'll just focus back on the actual boss. I was expecting to have more difficulty with Godric, so I summoned Nephili and the jellyfish right away. That actually led to me beating him first try this time around, but unfortunately I do have some complaints still, because of course I do. Mostly it's in the AoEs. Not so much that he has them, as it's a reasonable solution to keep the game challenging for players using summons. And more that there is very little telegraphing with how fast they come out. They also stagger, so if you're hit by one, then you're likely to be hit again. And again. In the first phase, this only really applies to his wind attack, which, like with the knights who have it, is really annoying, but not unmanageable. Nephili helped me get 2 staggers in a row, ensuring the first phase was over quickly. In the second phase, I can feel like every one of his attacks has an AoE attached to it. And to call out one attack specifically, he can start shooting fire in a wide arc, which can be dodged if you're already in the right position and don't get stuck on any of the terrain around the arena. And know that it's a sustained attack, so you need to run and not dodge, and expect the follow-up attack. And if you get hit once, just expect that you're going to get hit again. It's just a bunch of stuff that makes it seem like the assumption for how the player's fighting and what build they're using is baked in. I can't say I'm a fan of it. Thankfully, I have enough vigor to tank a couple hits and power my way through it. Godric's almost dead, and I try to rush him down. I get him down to a single pixel of health, and I take a hit at the very end. I stare into the face of death and an hour of grind. But no! A tick of poison saves me at the last minute. Even from beyond the grave, my summon seals the win. MVP? Aurelia the Jellyfish. I sense a pattern forming here. So overall, what did I think? The legacy dungeons like Stormveil are the closest in the intentions of the design to the Soul series, and the level design itself is better than ever. There's multiple routes branching away from the critical path, plenty of hidden areas rewarding curious and clever players, awesome vertical level design taking you from the tops of the roofs to the floor of a deep canyon carved through the castle. Exploring the level is a joy. The enemies in combat, less so, and most of it is tied up in the camera. It's always been a problem, but with the enemies being faster than ever, there really needs to be some concessions to keep it from swinging around the way it does. The instant AoE spam forces defensive playing, when the homing attacks are better countered aggressively, leading to combat encounters that seem at odds with itself. Either roll too late and get hit by the AoE, or roll too soon and get hit by attacks used to catch panic rolls. All the enemies introduced here were ones I found annoying to fight, if not necessarily difficult. So let's call this a mixed bag as a whole. Will my enjoyment at the exploration be greater than my annoyance at the combat design? Maybe. Exploration is something I highly value in games. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Next time, Liurnia of the Lakes. Thanks again for watching my video. What did you think of Stormveil Castle? Did you fully explore it, or just rush down Godric? Remember to subscribe to be updated when I release a new video. If you want to support the making of these videos and other video game critiques, check out my Patreon. All my videos are put up on Patreon ad-free, and $10 patrons will get a shout out at the end of the next video. See you all next time!